Well, God bless you. This is Apostle coming at you. We know that you're still being blessed by what the revelation that God gave us in December and continued this year of 2022. And that is from his house to your house. Well, these summit teachings have continued to be a blessing, and there will be more. So get ready and stay tuned to be blessed by tonight's summit teaching.
God bless you. Kingdom blessings to everybody. I know this has been a high energy day already. I'm already excited. Got my crayon energy juice here and pumped up and ready to go. So let's get started. Let's get going. So our subject today is grant writing. I'm going to just jump in and I'll throw some other things in between here, but it's a lot of ground to cover. And so I just want to take as much time and make the most of as much time as we do have together. I'm piling a lot of stuff into this hour because I really want you to feel like you got some meat out of this. But we're going to first take some time in these first two sections to just lay a foundation of what we're talking about today and how to operate in the world of grant writing. So what is a grant? For today's purposes, we are going to share a definition. But first of all, we're just going to say that because we are looking at this whole session about it's in our house, that's what we first need to know, that it's available to us and it's in the house. It's in the house. A grant is funding from, let's see, move that over there. A grant is funding from a government entity. It's from a corporation, a foundation, government agency that does not require repayment and is given to support a program, project, or general operation of a 501c3 organization. All that to say is the majority in the traditional world of grants, the majority of those funds go to agencies that are already designated as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. That is the traditional sense. And I know some of you are asking, okay, but I have a business, I have this, I'm a little different. Are there any exceptions for these rules? If it's a business and I'm just starting up, I'm trying to go to school, or I don't even yet have my 501c3 papers. They're being held up by the IRS. Yes, there are some other options. For for-profit parts of it, you are a business, you're looking to make money. So you're not going through these side doors of, I'm not here for that. I'm trying to help the community, but your bottom line is the bottom line. We're trying to make money. There are some things that you can do. You can seek contracts with the government through what's called a RFP process, request for proposals. You can also be a part of business programs that give out micro loans. We'll talk a little bit along the way about small business development centers or corporations that have programs that you can go through to not only bring structure to your new budding business, but also bring you some resources along the way, such as a micro loan. And it's basically just that. It's a small loan. Sometimes they're as small as $5,000, maybe as much as 10, that need to be paid back, but it's at a longer period of time that you pay it back and at a smaller interest rate. Sometimes you can do sub-grant opportunities by partnering with a nonprofit organization and be the second tier of the funding after that. Or you could be a part of what's called venture capitalists. And it's a modern day version, like an online version of Shark Tank. And basically what you do is you cast your net out there and cast your vision and tell them what you're about, what you're trying to do, what you hope to do, and to see if anybody is out there in the world interested in supporting you. There is a agency, there is a program that specifically supports that, and it's called wefunder.org. That's we, capital WE, as in we are people, funder, FUNDER.com. And basically what they do, they go through a vetting process with the business, and then they position them before possible venture capitalists, people who are just everyday people who are out for an adventure and they want to sow seed somewhere, but they don't have necessarily the time to vet everybody out. You go through this process, they cast it out there, and it's like a more professional version of a GoFundMe page. Then you can also have what are called fiscal agent partnerships, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the last part with the pending 501c3 part. And then if you're an individual, most traditional grants are going to say we don't fund individuals. Yet there are other ways to kind of go around it. The traditional sense would be to apply for student aid through the FAFSA application process, which is the free application for federal student aid. That's where you get the traditional Pell grants and the small student loans that get many of us through college. Those are those types of entities. So that's the traditional route for student grants. Then you could also do, if by chance you are a budding artist or you've been in the arts in some length of time and you want to go do something and take it to another level, you've got this creative idea for a mural or installation across the city, those types of things, I advise you to go to the City of Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs. They have a grants program specifically for individual artists, and it comes up a couple of times throughout the year, and you can apply to them. Another one you can do is possibly a fellowship program for the field of study that you are looking to expand in. For me, it would be writing and the creative arts. There are a couple of places that I have in the back of my mind one day to apply for these fellowship programs when I have the luxury of just sitting in a log cabin away from everything and all the cares of the world for 3 months. And these places will fund it for 3 months. Food, clothing, food, shelter, and the whole shebang for 3 months. In addition to that is the individual development account program, and you can be a part of that. It's kind of like a sweat equity type of thing. You find out about them a lot in the small business development centers, and basically after you've gone through so many classes or you invested so much of your time, they'll match your dollars or savings, or they'll give a certain amount of money to your business startup. But many of those, you just have to be a member to do it. And then also, if you are a pending 501c3 and you're still waiting for those papers, and sometimes foundations will allow you to apply even with the pending 501c3 status. One example of an agency that will allow you to still apply is the Chicago Foundation for Women. They have various different grant cycles that come up throughout the spring, if that's something you're interested in. But one thing you need to know is what their beliefs are. And you have to understand if you want to match your mission with their beliefs, and we'll talk about that a little later. But there are some other options. So now, show me the money. After this section, we'll take a quick break to see if we have any questions. I know it's a lot of information and it's only going to get deeper, but I want to pour as much into you as we possibly can in this hour, because I just really believe that this is the time that God's people need to know how to get the funds for the dreams that He's placed within their spirits. With all that said, I want us to always keep in mind that our business model for the grants is the business model of the kingdom. In my world, my work world, I can't often speak of or verbally put out there that it's a faith-based entity. In the world of grants, many times they shun it. They don't want to fund anything that has to do with proselytizing and evangelizing and the physical structure of a church building or faith-based entity, or lobbying, or anything that has to do with swaying someone's opinion. They don't want to do that. They just want to fund the basic needs of life: food, clothing, shelter, social needs, those types of things. But for today's purpose, so we can understand the reason why God put that dream inside of you, the reason why is premises of scripture such as this one found in 2 Corinthians 9 verses 8 through 9. I won't read the whole thing, but the gist of it is that God opens doors for you in the works of your hands because he gave you a good work to do. And it's a charitable donation situation. And because it's that, he will supply the need for it. But we have to keep the mindset that the money that he brings into our hands isn't just to lace our pockets. It's not just for us to look good and floss. It's not for us to get the PPE loan and buy a new car with it, because now we're lying and we're not being good stewards over his finances. But when we do the good work that he called us to do, he will bring abundance into our hands and allow us to do these things for his kingdom and the advancement of his kingdom. So always, for me, even when I'm at work, even if I can't say the name Jesus, it's always in my being and in my knower that it's a kingdom mindset, and it's for kingdom reasons and principles and purposes that we are getting these funds. So now let's look at a strategy, the grants strategy. Similar to our faith: ask, seek, knock. In the asking part, we prepare to engage with grantors using what I call 3 F's. Friendship first, then funds. Friendship first, then funds. If you just saw me up walking down the street and you didn't know anything about me, but you just happen to know, oh, I think she came into some money, or she looks like she got some money, I'm just going to ask her. I need $10,000, Stacy. Yeah, you were bold enough to ask, but you're not my friend. I don't know you. You haven't taken that step to initiate and engage a relationship with me. Remember that funders are just the same way. It's like a courtship. Just briefly, I had an encounter at my job where I got a random call from some young lady and organization. They were just vetting out different organizations that did the work we did, looking to see where they might want to support. We started a friendship. Over the course of a year, we'd have a few phone calls, emails. Nothing really came of it for a long time, but maybe a $2,500 check around Christmas, an act of kindness. About another year later, they wrote a check for $100,000 for a new program that fit who they were and where we were going at the same time, because I took the time to establish a friendship. Friendship first, then funds. Next, seek. Look for opportunities. Research grants. Network. Come to workshops like this. How I wish we all were in one room. I love seeing people's faces, engaging their energy, but we can't do it like that right now because of the coronavirus. But we are still engaging. We are still in the process of iron sharpening iron. And so we seek these opportunities so we can find out where funders are, what they're into, what they like, and what matches up with what we're about. And then we knock. Once we've done our due diligence, once we've done that homework, once we develop those friendships, even if it was just simple as sending out an email or requesting their newsletter, whatever it is, we are building up our understanding of who they are. We're showing interest in who they are so that when we go to knock, when we go to ask, we can do it with confidence. I put this slide up here just to show how big and broad the whole world of grants really is. It's a lot of different moving parts, a lot of words, a lot of components, but at the end of the day, it's doable. It may seem like a lot of information, just what I've shared so far, but don't be overwhelmed. Even I started somewhere. My first grant, I had never written a grant. I never went to school just for grant writing. I went for writing, but not grant writing. I learned on the job. Someone took a chance that I could figure it out, and with God's help, I did. And you can too. So where do we look? We look for grants at foundations, corporations, banks, governments, corporations. I'll back up with there. If you think about the Kellogg's company, we eat their cereal. Tony the Tiger is great and all these wonderful things. And we never really think about, okay, so what do they do with that money? Is it just paying the CEO and all these six-figure salaries? If it's a socially conscious company, many times they have a giving arm. And the Kellogg's Corporation also has the Kellogg Foundation, and they're big on giving to social justice and youth and health initiatives all across the country. Then you have banks, you have government entities. We'll talk about that a little later. We have aldermen and state officials. Every alderman and state official, they have discretionary funds that they are giving each year that they have to use for certain things as community development. And many times they go through agencies and nonprofits within their jurisdiction to get those things done. But they really only tend to give those funds to the people who they already have relationships with. That's why we always say, oh, you scratch my back, it scratch yours. It sounds bad, but it's basically because they have friendships with those people. They have relationships with them. And you can open those doors too. There's listservs. If you are looking at any agencies or foundations online and they say, do you want to sign up for our newsletter? Say yes, because then you'll be the first one to know when they have an open application or when anything like that is available. Libraries, Google searches, of course, and look at other organizations that do work similar to what you're currently doing or what you want to do. Who funds them? Look at their website. Look at their annual reports. You can go to a website called the guidestar.org, and it'll pull up all different entities, their 990 tax statements, and on those tax statements, it lists their major funders. If you don't find their major funders there, you can go to their website and look for their annual reports. And on the back of their annual reports, they have to list all of their major funders there as well. This is a page here. You might want to take a snapshot of it. This is just an example of a funding opportunity portal through Bank of America. And I chose this one because it hits several of those examples that I just gave. It is a bank. It's also ran as a corporation. And as such, they also have a giving arm of their own. They give out grants directly from Bank of America. And not only do they give out grants from Bank of America, they are the trustee of over 100 different foundations across the country. And they also monitor and administer their grant programs as well. So if you go to that link, you will see a list similar to this one here on the side. And that's just a snapshot of it. And you can go through and vet and see if you and your work fit any of those funders and their eligibility criteria. This is also another example, City of Chicago. If you're living in the Chicago area, if you don't live in the Chicago area and you're in Indiana or another surrounding city or state, they have to have similar situations on their portals as well. This is the iSupplier portal, and you can pull that up. You might want to take a shot of this link as well. And if you go there, it'll give the list of all the current open RFPs, requests for proposals, that are available. Some of those are specifically for nonprofit organizations, and other are for businesses who can do contract work with the city. This one, just as a reminder from our previous session, this one you'd have to sign up for an account. It's a couple of steps. If you get lost in the minutia of the steps, they have a tech team that can help you do that. But for this particular part, you can just look at the link. You don't necessarily need a password or anything to look at the list. You need a password to apply. Once you got to that link, this is kind of what it would look like. And if you went to any government entity, you'd probably see something like this. And on this link, you'd see the list of funding opportunities with the various departments within the city of Chicago, such as Department of Youth, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Seniors, so on. Here are some quick tips. And we're going to go and gather some questions in a minute, just one or two, so we can continue to the meat of the matter. Some quick tips or hacks in this whole granting world. Before you get started, remember to balance your focus between what a funder wants and what you need. Remember to create and expand programs only with your goal in mind, not just for a check. And know who you be, as our apostle H. Daniel Wilson always says. Know your character, who you were shaped to be, what mission God called you to, and avoid drifting from that mission at all costs, because the cost is too costly. Remember earlier I mentioned the Chicago Foundation for Women and how they have a series of grant opportunities coming up. And I put a little footnote there to make sure that you can align with their mission, or that you're okay with theirs, because that particular foundation, they have a broad definition of womanhood. By that, I mean they support emphatically the LGBTQ community structure. If you feel that your faith-based entity or you as a faith-based individual can't align with that, or you can't find a component of that you're okay with, because, okay, this piece over here fits what I'm doing and still apply, then maybe that's not the place for you. But if you can, and you can find the balance between it without feeling like you're compromising anything for you and your faith, by all means, go for it. Let's take a minute for a question or two. Let's see, do we have a question?
Yes, Minister Stacy. One question is, what's an average size grant?
An average size grant, I always tend to say it's about $10,000. That's generally the baseline. It can be smaller than that, but in order to really get a bang for your buck and make it worth your while and your time, you would always want to try to target that amount. And in most cases, most foundations that have a credible giving coffer, as they say, they got a big purse, they're going to give at least that amount.
Also, Gwen is asking about a website, something about star.org. If you could repeat that website again.
Sure. GuideStar.org, GUIDE, star like the North Star.org. And that's a good place to do a lot of research on the foundations, on other agencies similar to yourself. You can find out who their board members are, who their key staff are, their good financial standing or not. You can see their tax records, who are their major givers. It's like a better business bureau for the nonprofit world. Another one is Charity Navigator. If you want to really check out an agency, because there have been a lot of grant scams out here through the years, a lot. And if you don't know anything about who you're applying to, you're working with, you may think, oh, they're a legitimate grant source. If you want to find out for sure, check out one of those two entities. They're both online systems, and they're similar to the Better Business Bureau, but for specifically nonprofits.
Last question. How long does it take to get a grant?
The average time is about 3 months from the time you submit the application to the time you could actually get a check in the mail. For some of them still do hard copy checks or a deposit. The reason why it's that type of a process is because they have vetting on their end. They first of all want to make sure that you follow all their directions. We're about to talk about some of their specific directions, things that they look for to just toss out an application so they can whittle down the pool of stuff that they have to look through. So they're looking for, okay, you didn't use 12 point font times. Next, we don't have to read that one. Okay, we can look at the other 99 that we have. So they're looking for stuff like that. And also that you're in line with what their requests are and what their needs are, that it matches with you. Thank you for those great questions. Okay, so now that we've laid the foundation and we've had a moment to breathe and kind of digest the definitions and the importance and understanding the kingdom mindset of why we do what we do, now let's look at how do we put all of this in writing. First of all, let's look at some rules of engagement, some things I just kind of mentioned. You want to always follow the funder's instructions. Simple things like ignoring the page length, the font sizes, word counts, page limits, all those types of things will get your application tossed out. For some agencies, it's because they're just trying to be mean sticklers. But for the most of them, it's because they get so many inquiries and their staff is too small to go through 100 applicants with pages worth of typos, or it's hard to read. You insisted on double spacing and anything that makes their life harder automatically gets put to the side. So please, by all means, follow their instructions. And another hack of doing this is to always title each section or repeat their question. That way there's no doubt about, did you answer the question correctly on your end or their end? It puts it right before you. If they're asking you, what do you think your capacity to serve this population is, it's right there in front of you. I always go back and reread the question several times as I'm writing it, pulling out catchphrases, pulling out keywords, and sometimes even mimicking those exact words in my response, because I want to make sure I answered their question and did it thoroughly. Another set of rules of engagement: use active voice as often as you can. It keeps them engaged and lets them know something about your field of industry that they didn't know before. And when you review your writing, do it as if you were the funder. You're reading it as if you're getting to know you and your agency and your work for the very first time. What is it that they need to know about your mission? What is it that they need to know? And also with reviewing, let somebody else read it. Even me, and I've been doing this for years, I always have someone else to look over it and for me, and just to make sure that, okay, did I answer that correctly? Did I have any typos? Those types of things. Even if it's just a friend of yours who's an English teacher or your high school student at home who gets straight A's in English, let somebody look at it. For some foundations, they do a prep step that's called a letter of inquiry, and it's basically, once again, to weed out the extra applications and makes it easier to know that, okay, we're all on the same level. Our missions kind of align. We're looking at doing some of the same work. So it's worth our time and energy to review this. And also on your end, you don't want to spend a whole bunch of time and energy writing out 5, 10, 15, 20 even pages worth of narrative and so forth. And it's not even something that they're interested in reviewing. So when given this option of a letter of inquiry or letter of interest, I always accept it. Now let's look at the key parts of the proposal. This is where we're going to get into the meat of how to build the structure of a winning proposal. I'll give some guidelines of sentence numbers or paragraph page numbers, but that's only in the event that the funder who's requesting your application has not given you any guidelines. If they give you guidelines, by all means, follow those. Organization description. So at this point, you're describing to them your history. How did you get started? Why? Give them your elevator speech. What's your passion? What's your mission? Why is this something that you're excited about? Why is this your passion? And what is the dream? And why should they be engaging in this? What's the vision here? And it's usually about a paragraph of a good nutty story. And after you perfect it for a while, it'll become like a boilerplate template, and you can just insert it at the beginning of every proposal that you do. Your next would be your statement or need, or the needs proposal, needs statement, some of them will call it. And this is where you map out what cause that you are champion of, or what problem you're trying to solve. Why is it important to you, and why should they care? And this is, you're trying to make an argument. This is the problem. Streets of Chicago, there's violence. Okay, they know it, but what's unique about what you're going to do about it? Okay, grew up in the Inglewood community where there's a plight of dilapidated housing, boarded up housing, so on and so forth. We see a part of this as we need to rehab these abandoned buildings. Bam. You put that in, that's your 3 to 4 core sentences. After that, you're going to give some facts, statistics, data. You may want to pull it from reputable sources like Woodstock Institute or Census, or maybe you've been doing this work long enough that you can speak from your own expertise. At that point, you're going to do that, and you'll speak to that point for about 3 to 5 sentences. Program description. This is always the longest part of the proposal because you're now describing what you're going to do about the problem you just expressed to them. What do you plan to do about it? What's the overall goal? How are you going to structure? This is a place where you're going to give demographics about the specifics of the population you're going to serve, how many days a week, what are the activities, how are the hours structured, how many, we're talking about home development, how many homes are you trying to rehab? How many have you already done? How many people would that bring housing to in that community? How many people would that make safer because they didn't have to walk past that border building? Those are the types of things you're going to build out in this section. It's about a page and a half, sometimes 2, unless, like I said before, they give you other guidelines. Organizational capacity. This is where you're going to describe your staff experience, the qualifications. When Alessandra read my bio at the beginning, it wasn't to give a pat on the back to Stacy. I already know what I've accomplished, but it puts out a level of credibility and a level of she's an expert in what she's saying, so that you can understand and receive me in a way that maybe if she didn't say it, you'd be questioning if I really knew what I was talking about. Same here. Organizational capacity. This is where you're going to tell them about your expertise, your qualifications, the trainings you've had, certifications. They may ask you to submit your resumes and your bios, your board list, your bullet points about your org chart. Don't clam up. A lot of people get nervous. Oh, you want my resume? That's got my personal address on it. There are other ways if you just want to do a bio, but you have to put that information out there because your expertise brings credibility and a solid look to your organizational expertise. Usually about a paragraph or 2. Sometimes you can do it in bullet points, and others may just ask for an org chart. This section here, GOAO. Every proposal worth its salt is going to have some level of what we're about to do here. You may want to take a snapshot of this screen here as well. Some applications will look at it and call it a logic model. They may call it a metrics model. something of that, a goal statement. Basically, this chart gives the step-by-step logistics of how you're going to do what you said in the narrative. It takes you from what the problem is to the steps and the stages of how you're going to solve the problem. So here for G, goals. What are you going to do? We can look at this and think of it as short-term, long-term, and intermediate goals. We're talking about the example of housing. Our long-term goal is to establish one new housing development project on this dilapidated block. Our immediate goal is to start boarding up the houses that are already abandoned. Our short-term goal is to get permits so that we can do those things and have access to those buildings, those steps and stages that get to the big picture goal that you're after. The next one would be O, objectives. So where, when, and why do you want to do this? Think in terms of numbers. How many houses? How many people will be put in a position where they have housing? How many additional people will be safer walking down that block? However, your lens of trajectory is, whatever it is that your long-term goal is, think in terms of that, and also think in terms of numbers. A, activities. So you've explained to me what your long-term goal is, the big picture, what your objectives, your hope is. Now, how are you going to do it? These are the activities. Think in terms of the workshop, the actual work of the program. It might be field trips if this was a youth program. It might be training if this was a job development program. What are the activities, the day-to-day interactions that you'd have with the clients, the participants, the neighborhood, whatever your target population of service is? What are the activities that you would be doing toward your goal? And then at the end, outcomes. So what would be the outcome of all this work that you've done? What will be the results? And be able to show it in numbers. Goals, objectives, activities, outcomes. Budgets. Now, this is just a general idea of how to structure your budget if you're not given guidelines specifically from the foundation or whatever government entity it might be that you're applying for. In general, you want to target your structure of funding so that 70% of what you're asking them for is going specifically to direct services of addressing the problem and the need that you said you needed the money for in the first place. At least 70%, the largest sum, you should want it to go in that direction. Then after that, they realize, okay, yes, you're going to have actual people and staff to do this work. So about 20% of salaries can go to that. A question was asked in the previous session about, are these salaries rolled up into the programs or are these set aside salaries? It depends on how your organization is structured. If you are a single entity, you only do one particular thing and nothing else, you only do an after school program, then by default, your staff is already considered part of the program staff. And the other staff salary might be auxiliary staff, like the receptionist who answers the phone, the maintenance person who cleans up the after school room space at the end. And then last, administration. These are the other costs that just go with just everyday operations, the printer, the copier, postage, those types of things. This is a sample of what a budget template would look like. Just to show you, I won't go line by line, but the gist of it is that you want your budget to balance out as best you can. You want to say that the amount of money and resources the revenues that we have or are expecting balance out to what we say we need the money for as far as expenses. So if overall you're saying that you need $10,000 from them and you can only show expenses worth $5,000, what do you need the other $5,000 for? They'll ask questions like that. So you need the story to balance out in numbers, and the story in the numbers has to reflect what story you told them in the narrative in the slides we discussed earlier. Now let's put it together. What happens when we converge the positive components of the narrative with the positive components of the budget? We get a winning proposal, at least about 85% of the time. If you've done the due diligence, it's going to take some time to get to that 85%, because you're practicing, you're getting to know this whole world, how it works. But after you kind of get the groove of it and you know who you be, as Apostle would say, and you can tell the narrative and show that you have a quality program, that you have a trustworthy, quality and credentialed team, and that you will plan goals, objectives, activities, and outcomes, and that your budget can show and justify that you have a solid structure and that you're good stewards over those monies, you have a winning proposal. It all works hand in hand. You can take a quick shot of this as well. This is a resource page. Just to give you some examples of some of those small business development centers I discussed before, places where you can find lists of grants, resources of places that you can go to if you have challenges or need support in this whole grants world. Even the more Forefront is excellent for that. There's here other resources about state and federal government funding. Can be heavy on the brain. I'm not pushing you that deep into the deep right now, but if you're interested in it, it's there. And then also, if you perchance have what you consider a faith-based agency, that's all is through the church and that alone. And Stacy, I don't plan on doing anything extra, then perhaps check out the National Christian Foundation. They have a plethora of services that can possibly help guide you through that process as well. So let's pause. Let's see, do we have any final questions?
To know, what do most grants typically ask for?
Most of them ask for the things I told you today. They're going to ask you to explain your organization, your capacity, your mission, the problem. Why do they need to help you with the problem? They're going to ask you to map out for me how you plan to get this done. What is your program structure? What are your goals, your objectives? All the things I squeezed into this little pocket of time today, they are going to ask of you. And so it's best on the front end as much as you can to try to prepare for those questions. If you feel at this point, okay, Stacy, I can't answer how we're going to get it done. Okay, this is your homework. Take some time, look at what your program, the mission is, and now maybe think backwards out of that. Okay, so how are we going to get there? What type of people do we need to involve? Do I need to be having classes and trainings? Do I need to go to classes and training? What types of pieces do we need? Some people may say, I don't even know how to explain my mission statement. Okay, then you have some homework to do. So as much as I could today, I laid out the types of things that they are going to ask you for, even down to the budget. And the budget piece, I just kind of skimmed the surface on what that could go into, because budget questions can get deep. They can get really deep. They can ask you for your 990s. And some nonprofits may say, well, we're too small. We haven't had that yet. They had those $9.90 to go kind of cars where you kind of got a pass from doing the full $9.90. And so some foundations may accept that and other ones may not. Some of them may say, I want to see an audit. Some, it just depends. So, but today I gave you the foundational basics of what you need to have.
Do for-profits organizations still have to give 5% of their end-of-year earnings to a not-for-profit organization? And, sorry, it's a two-parter. Does Bank of America provide grants to organizations that are waiting for their 501c3s?
Okay. So the first part, that's basically the structure of foundations. The way they are structured by law, they have to give at least 5% of their earnings, because they get earnings off of interest, they get earnings off of endowment funds, those types of things, and they have to give. Corporations sometimes can be a little differently depending on how they're set up. They're not necessarily required to have a foundation, but if they do choose to have a foundation, then the foundation is governed by the same laws that a traditional foundation would be governed by. Repeat the second part of that again for me.
Sure. Does Bank of America provide grants to organizations that are waiting on their 501c3?
Okay. So in some instances, their direct grants don't. However, remember I gave you their link, and there's like over 100 different foundations just on that link. So some of those possibly do.
Okay. Thank you. Ashley has a follow-up. If one is a 501c3 but have not really had startup building costs, what advice do you have when writing a grant?
Okay, she doesn't yet have startup costs. You need to look at what would be your costs if you were going forward. Okay, so you could project out what your expenses would be, even though you haven't started the work. So for example, you can project out that in order to do whatever it is you're saying to do, someone's got to do the work, right? So that means someone has to get a salary. Someone has to get a salary. Someone has to get fringe benefits. You can project out, are you doing this work from home, or are you doing it outside in a brick and mortar space? If you're doing it in a brick and mortar space, then you have rent. You got to rent. And even if you're doing it from home, depending on how you are structuring things with your accountant, I will say with your accountant, because that's not my field of expertise, you may be able to write off a portion of your mortgage as a expense. So when you start collecting and thinking about stuff like that, oh, I'm going to have to mail stuff out, I'm going to have to make copies, those are line item expenses. Now you can think out of that. Okay, now I see how much I need. Now I can say, okay, I need money. Now, do you have anything that you can put down as revenue is really the question. So at that point, are you getting a micro loan? Are you investing any money on your own? Do you have any venture capitalists or other people who are putting in things? Have you gotten any startup funding from anywhere? But I always like to look at first, what are the expenses? And then by default, you'll know what the need is. These are great questions.
Okay. Two additional questions. So I have an idea or a concept, but I don't really know how to get started. Are there resources available to me to get me started?
Yes. Yeah, that's why I was saying about small business development centers. Women's Business Development Center is a good one. Greater Englewood has a small business development center. You can just literally Google small business development centers. Chicagoland area, that is actually a government funded banner of programs across the country. And wherever you are, you can find a location. And I always recommend those because they tend to be business incubators. So you can walk in the door, sign up. There's basically no cost because it's federally funded,
Mhm.
and come in and say, I just want to sign up for classes. I have an idea, and that's all I have. And they will walk you through the process of building out a mission, a statement, a vision, a business plan, walk you through the process of getting your 501c3s. If you're doing it that way, your S Corp, your LLC, whatever structure you're doing, they'll walk you through that process. They'll recommend to you what is the best component, which structure governmentally is best for what you're trying to do. And then when you get involved in those, then you're often eligible for their micro loans, those small $5,000 to $10,000 loans I was talking about before, because you have gone through their process. They're vetting you out, and by them being either federally funded or nonprofit entities themselves, they're getting grant funds in order to help people like you. So a lot of those times they can subgrant those funds to you after you go through their program. Sometimes there may be a piece of a sweat equity to it. I think I mentioned earlier individual development accounts. Those are IDA programs. And basically, it's kind of like a sweat equity after you've gone through our classes, after you've put in so many hours of time learning what we are teaching you and putting it into work. You can start saving up a certain amount of money to it yourself, and they can match it. So if you only have $500 going in and you kind of put it into the IDA account along the way, and if their agreement was that after you finish this 3-month program, this 6-month program, this 12-month program, however it's structured, we'll match it. By the time you finish, you now have $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So those are different ways to take it from, I just have this idea, I just have a dream, and but this year I need to make some moves. I highly recommend you connect with some place like that.
All right, thanks for that. Vanessa says she's using LegalZoom to assist with her 501c3. Can she use their fee and file on her taxes, as well as she has some additional startup costs? Can she file that on her taxes?
I'm not an accountant, so I don't want to say for sure, but I think that you could. You could. If you're in the process of filing paperwork to become a legal entity, yes. I if I could have recommended it to you, you're doing this by yourself through LegalZoom, but if I could have recommended, I would have recommended that ahead of time. I would have recommended that you went to an accountant or someone who's an accountant / in their purview could help you with business structure, because then it's like a one-stop shop. You are getting an invoice from them for helping you with your business structure. You're getting an invoice from them for doing all these other pieces. And then by default, they're your accountant. So they're going to do your taxes. So now it all rolls back into that. But possibly, yes.
Okay, thank you. Gwen wanted to know if you could share the name of the organization again that you were just walking through that assists.
Oh, small business development centers. There are various ones. Chicago Urban League has a component of one. They have a lot of excellent programs there. The Women's Business Development Center, like I said, the Greater Inglewood Development Center. The Greater Inglewood, I don't know how many people are online right now familiar with the development project in Inglewood in the city of Chicago, where there's a Whole Foods, and Kennedy King College went through this transformation. Greater Inglewood Development Center had a major part to play in all of that. And they are doing a lot to develop the businesses surrounding that community. So now if you drive through there now, what was once just vacant light all across the blocks is flourishing. It's starting to see a change. So places like that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Stacy. Those are our questions from the audience. We're going to transition back into our wrap-up comments.
Thank you, Nakia, and for everyone for those wonderful questions. And it looks like we didn't get to all of them, but I thank you for those who did submit questions along the way. And if by chance you want to contact me, here's my contact information. And you see my little emoji down there that says, do it, do it, do it. Because all of this information today will just be notes on the shelf. It'll just be a tab in your iPad or wherever you store your workshop notes if you don't do it, if you don't activate, if you don't take at least one of these steps that we talked about today. For some of you, the step might be to connect with a small business development center so you can cultivate your dream. For somebody else, you may already know what it is and you may already have your 501c3, but you now you need to take steps on actually doing the work of proposals and development and so forth. I took you through these stages because I want you to be prepared for all the different things that could come up. I could have dived deep on any one of these for probably an hour by themselves, but for giving us the small pocket of time that we have and so much, I just wanted to at least expand your exposure to. This is how we did it today. I also, by passion and the different degrees I have, I'm a writer and I love to write. And last year I released my first novel, and I don't have time to kind of pop in and out to go to the vending table, but here is my debut novel for your consideration, Hurt But Not Harmed. It's a beautiful story about a family who goes through transitions with their secrets. And hopefully at the end, we can all learn something from it about ourselves and our own lives. And my code is right there at the corner, so you can just scan over that. It'll take you right to the link on Amazon.com. And other than that, I just say have a blessed workshop today. I just speak life onto everyone here. If you have a passion and a desire, not just to write grants, but this for you, but this is just something like, I just got to do this because there's a bigger kingdom purpose waiting for me. I want to release an impartation to you. God dropped that in my spirit. Like each time you do the session, I want you to do an impartation over those who are there. And so if that is you, just raise your hands and receive this impartation. So God, I just thank you for everyone and each person's time. And God, I just believe and decree that everything that you allowed me to learn, even the things I had to learn the hard way, will come smoothly to them. Open up their understanding, open up their comprehension. Let them not be overwhelmed. Let them not be intimidated by this process, but help them to walk through it, oh God. Everything that you allowed me to learn, God, I imparted to them this day. In Jesus' name we pray and decree it to be so. Now do it and do it for the kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a blessed day, everybody.
Wow, what an awesome teaching. We got some awesome teachers, chefs here in the Valley, and we know that you will be blessed. But this is also just a teaser for the other upcoming summit that shall be coming up. You need to be a part. If you missed the first one and you caught these by our streaming, you need to be live for the next one because it is blessing you, and we pray that you're receiving what is coming from God's house to your house. God bless you. See you at the next summit.